Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good, Frank. Good to see you.
Yeah, same here, man.
So,
So,
took a week off in Hawaii.
yeah, did.
Tell us about it.
Maui, what's there to tell you?
Oh,
You know?
man. Was it beautiful?
It was absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. I'm not like a complete world traveler, but I love it there. I'm just drawn to it, so yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep. I got to bring my parents, which is cool.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah, so now I'm the favorite child.
Have they been there before?
No, it's first time, yeah.
Okay.
First
cool.
time, so, it was nice to bring them because, I knew they would love it, so, and they did. And that's what refreshed it for me because I think this is my 5th or 6th time there.
Okay, cool.
And, watching it through their eyes made it like the first time for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back, man. In Perspective Shift Studio.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you feel like diving into tonight?
I don't know. Let's just see where it takes us, and I don't know what do you want to bring up today. Well, something that's going to shift our perspective because that's what this is about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what a good topic might be to kind of dive into.
You know what I've been focusing on? So, like when I was in Maui and stuff, because nothing was pulling at me, I did a lot more meditations, different types of meditations, and my main focus was like when you're looking out at beautiful like a tree or the ocean, what makes it so is the space around it. So it's like focusing in on the gaps and the silence in between stuff. So it gives you a different perspective.
The unmanifest.
Yeah, the unmanifest where all manifestation comes from.
Yep.
So it was interesting because it was easy to do. It wasn't something I had to work at. I found myself doing it. And then I was listening to a lecture, a talk, and actually one of it was Terrence McKenna. He was, I like listening to him. And he was talking about that, and he mentioned it was interesting because it was synchronistic how he mentioned about the gaps and it was one of his talks, he was talking about it. And I found myself doing that even prior to him saying it, and not realizing that's what I was doing. But you just look around the space. If you see a beautiful tree and the way it's laid out, and in Hawaii they got these beautiful trees. They have this banyan tree, and it's amazing. But you can only notice it because of the space around it. And in that particular tree, it's interesting because it's one tree. But when you go into the park, it's like a park there in Lahaina, it looks like you're in a mini forest. But it's one tree. And then when you actually trace it out, you realize there are, I guess it would be considered branches. I didn't look into it. But they would grow down to the ground to support the limbs growing out. So when you actually follow from the main trunk of the tree, the base of it, it is one tree, but you feel like you're in this forest. And to me, it's just amazing because you don't see that too many places, But just you can only notice it if you notice the space around it. And that's kind of where I was. And it was kind of like I was on this major high when I was there. And I don't know if it's Hawaii does that or, well, it's the excuse I give it.
Of course.
Yeah, it really is because it is our consciousness allowing us to do it. And for me, going to a place like Hawaii or any place that's near the water, or even when I go to Sedona, it allows me to let go of attachment. And so I give it the excuse like, well, Maui's my favorite place, but it's my permission slip to allow myself to feel
the peace.
Yeah, a major peace. Yeah,
the silence.
Yeah, it didn't matter what happened, what went on. It was just like, yeah, it's like this is cool.
It's funny you talk about that space. That's totally the trick of this whole thing, and I know what you mean. This last week, so it started to get cold here in Arizona. Frank's laughing because he's from New York.
Yeah.
But, it was 45 degrees this morning.
I've been out here long enough to where I know what you're talking about. I was cold. Yeah.
I was born in Arizona, so cold to me is anything south of 70 degrees.
Yeah.
And so 45 degrees, this morning. I remember being outside and just thinking about, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it was in the 90s, at
Yeah.
that same time. And it was so weird because I could feel that space that you're talking about within the weather. I was like, nothing has changed, but just the feeling of the space around me has changed.
Yeah.
And, the way and how funky weather is.
It is because, it's interesting. Whether it's hot or cold, it's the same thing. It's frequency vibrating movement. The only
You can feel the frequency.
Yeah, the only difference between hot or like say 90 degrees and 45 degrees is degrees themselves. But it's the same thing. And a lot of times people think cold and hot are opposites, but they're not. They're just different in degrees. They have different polarities to it. But it's one thing. It's a frequency movement. Obviously, when we call a higher degree, it's the frequency is moving at a faster pace, creating more turbulence and what we call heat, friction. And then when it slows down, it's still creating friction, but not as much to where it generates the heat comparative to a 90 degree opposed to 45. So when you start looking at it, we often say it's opposite, but it's the same thing. It's just a different degree of the same thing. So even in the laws or principles of polarity, they're not opposites. They're just different degrees of the same thing. So like if you take hate and love, they're the same thing. It's just a different degree of field of energy. They're not opposites. They're just different degrees. And the further or the less dense and movement you get away from what we call love would be the higher frequency, you're feeling it. Just like, if you're in a nice 85 degree weather and it jumps down to 30 below, you're feeling it. But 30 below is still creating heat.
It's funny you say
but
that.
Not the level.
What is it? There's no such thing as cold. There's only an absence of heat.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as actually absolute cold, and there's no such thing as absolute heat because there's a continuum of frequencies. But, obviously humans, when it comes to cold and heat, we can only experience frequency levels or else we freeze up or we burn up. Mm-hmm. But it continues on beyond the scope of we can survive within it. That's why, roughly 72 degrees is known to man as the most comfortable.
That's funny.
But Arizona, that's cold. 72 degrees.
Hey,
I'm freezing.
Right? Seriously, I know what you mean. That's going to have a flannel on.
But it's the dry. So it's funny they call it dry heat. But when it gets cold, the dry cold, what happens is when the wind blows, there's no humidity to keep. So your capillaries are closer to the surface of your skin in the heat. So you feel that cool, and it pulls the heat away from your body quicker because it's dry. And that's why we get the sensation of it being colder. Where in a more humid climate or in typically colder climates, your capillaries sink lower. Okay. So you're more protected. So there is a biology or physics of the biology of
aspect of it
too. Yeah. So, and that's what scientists all made up. It's a permission slip. No, I'm just messing.
Yeah,
with you.
it's a way for the mind to classify it and assign it.
Yeah, but there is. Is the physiology of the human body. When they look at it, there's an agreement upon. There is evidence to it. It's just old news. It's not new science. But yeah, and that's kind of, it's different degrees of perspective and how you look at it. So you can almost look at there is really no such thing as opposites, just different degrees on poles
of the same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It really is. So when you actually, the cool thing about that is what we know about energy is energy can be, we can conduct energy, we could transfer it. Mm-hmm. So if something is in the mind of an opposite, it's very difficult to transfer it. But if it's the same thing but a different degree, a different scale, you can then transfer it into the place in which you feel more comfortable, more preferential. So like emotions, like anger and excitement, or anger and happiness, right? They're the same energy, just a different degree of the energy. And because they're in the same field, I can transfer anger back into a different degree of happiness. I can actually move that, and that's where the alchemy in all of us come. And how do I do that? Perspective. It
Truly.
really is, yeah. When we change our perspective to what situation may have occurred outside of us, We literally start, the change in degree automatically happens when we change our perspective. Automatic. We don't have to do, it's not like a dial we have to turn, but once I change my perspective to a situation, circumstance, all of a sudden, the degrees of what I'm feeling starts to shift and starts moving into more preferential feeling. An emotion is what we call it.
That's because we are the light, and naturally what we focus on and what we, put our attention on, we start to kind of see play out on the screen, of life. So our consciousness is that light that takes shape and gives us this form of matter and creates reality in what we're calling our experience. Yeah. And so like as we understand these concepts, Frank and I don't just want to give this new age type of thing where it's about putting more and more only, these positive affirmations within the system, because you're trading one system for a new program, one program for a new program. We want you to consciously recognize the thoughts within your head and that you have the ability to change your perspective on them. But above that is you understand that there is no good or bad. You're playing a game, and there's this awesome Zen there's this Zen quote. Hold on, I actually have it.
Here you go. Google it.
Well, no, it's this is I love this.
Is it on your screensaver?
Well, I've got
right
I've got a photo of it. I always like to snap a screenshot when I see something.
That's the beauty about technology today.
It is.
Yeah.
So this is a abbreviated version. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When like and dislike are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. And it's so powerful because when saying you like or dislike something is putting a perspective onto something. So you don't really need... that if you'd like to experience a preferential or a positive experience, as we call it, you put your attention on that. But what Frank and I want you to see is that you can rest as this awareness and see that there is no such thing as like or dislike.
That's an opinion. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you begin to like or dislike, you are then taken into this third dimensional I am a person aspect. And when you are thinking through the person and living through the person, you are living through identity. And we call this ego identity. You have assigned meanings, characteristics, ideas of who this person is on earth. And Frank and I are talking about heaven on earth. What is heaven? Heaven is harmony. It's being one with all. That's what heaven is. And so the distinction between heaven and earth is putting a like and dislike, because a like and dislike is a very personal aspect, and we are not a person. We are a being. We are whole. To be whole, or to feel whole, be whole.
Yeah, because person comes from the word persona, which is a mask.
Mask.
So we wear many masks. It's like, Halloween coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
we'll,
I love it.
Present that, yeah.
I love Halloween.
So a personality is something is a trait we take on. And everyone has multiple personality order. Some people have multiple personality disorder.
Well, the Japanese say we have three faces. The face we show our family, the face we show our friend or our friends or the public, family, public, and then self.
Yeah.
And the one we show ourselves.
But even in different public avenues and different family attributes, you actually then alter those to different degrees, personas.
You're a brother. You're a father.
Yeah. So if I'm eating...
You're a professional,
if I'm going to my parents just for dinner, I have one persona. But
then you're Frankie,
yeah. But then if I was going to relatives with my family, then my persona in that family thing would actually alter as well. So it continuously changes. But so personality is different degrees of a persona, and that's how it is. But what you said earlier that caught my eye about... like and dislike, which is interesting, is the smartest people that philosophized and theorized on this planet all came to one understanding, is they don't know what they should know. But there is a knowing, and there's these principles, these correlations with these principles we talk about that are through the ages. When you study different cultures throughout time, the stories are similar. The stories of Christ go back beyond the point of Christ into the Egyptian time, in the Greek time, and you can find similar stories. So there is this, there's something built in humanity and humans that that's innate, that pulls us into this. And as we keep searching, thinking we need to know something, we're trying to figure out, we're trying to understand, we come to a conclusion. Our job isn't to understand. Our job isn't to figure it out. Our job is to observe and marvel over what we're in. Just like when I go to a play, I purchase tickets, I go to sit down, and I realize what I'm about to watch is make-believe. But somewhere along the line, when I start to cry or laugh, I get sucked into this make-believe world and it becomes real. But then during intermission or a set, the curtain will go up and they'll do a different set and you start clapping. You clap because the actors were so great. The story was so magnificent. It pulled you into what we think was real, but it was an illusion. And that's why we clap. Like, you got me. And this is what this world does. Basically, the world is an illusion that we live in. It's a storyline. And we came here, we bought a ticket, we bought a seat in the theater. So what's our job? To observe and to marvel. Not to get caught up, not to attach, not to try to change the play. I don't go to a play to change it. I don't like the way it should be this way. I don't know enough to change anything. I was like telling Mike earlier, it'd be like if I was the first human being on the planet and God called down to me and says, "My son Frank, what is it that I can offer you?" I'll be like, "A Snickers bar." He's like, "You might want some oxygen, you know? Let me give you the periodic table and let's start from there." I'm like, "Okay, when do I get a Snickers bar?" You know?
But that's so...
Yeah, we don't know enough to know what we like. But what it is interesting, perspective is just the ability to let go of something that's not preferential in the way we look at it. So my emotions, I don't like the way I feel. When I don't like the way I feel, what the emotions are telling me is let go of that. It's an alarm system. It isn't a negative thing. It's like if I heard a noise outside, you know, I'm like, what is that? And I put earplugs in my ear to block out the noise. And I wake up the next day and my car was stolen. It was telling me someone's trying to break into my car and you might want to go look into it. It wasn't something to avoid. And we're waking up to our emotions, especially males on this planet. The emotions aren't to push down, to forget about, stick your head in the sand, compress into us. They're actually telling us something. And so when you're going into what we call the negative emotions, such as frustration, fear, and all that stuff, it's literally telling you, change your perspective and you'll move from fear into courage. It's just a perspective shift. It has nothing to do with anything else. So so fear and courage are the same energy field from different degree points. That's it. Just like 40 degrees and 90 degrees are degrees of temperature that are the same field of energy. It's just a different degree within it. So courage and fear are the same thing. But when you're in a state of fear, that's when you can shift and turn it and change your perspective into courage.
And that applies to anxiety. That applies to everything.
But that's what it is. When fear comes upon me or anxiety comes upon me, I realize I just have to shift and look in the direction of courage when I'm in fear. Look in the direction of peace when I'm
You begin
anxiety.
to relabel it.
Oh, yeah. So now when
you don't see the energy as angst or anxiety.
What's
or
wrong with me?
Depression.
There's nothing wrong with you.
You understand, okay, this is growth.
This is growth. And what happens is, I still hit anxiety, I still have fear, but it becomes, I live in it it's almost like the analogy I've used when you're driving down the freeway and you're distracted and you veer off to the right and you hear digga, 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 digga. The second I hear that, without even thinking, I respond and move back left into the lane. Those things, that's an indication that I drifted. So instead of saying, what is that noise out there? Why is this always happening? I just simply move. It's telling me you're drifting, and if you keep drifting, you're going to roll the car because you're going to go into shoulder and go off the freeway.
So let's bring it back real quick to what you were saying about the analogy with the play, because I love this. So when Frank is talking about the play, and in the middle, we don't say, oh, this play should not be this way. The play has to go this way in order for it to be good. No, of course we wouldn't say that while we're at a play. That's ridiculous. We're here to experience.
We completely surrender to the experience.
The same thing is going on with what you are experiencing as this human being on Earth. You are trying to say, no, this life ought to go this way. Says who? This is a figurative concept that your mind has an impression of. In order to be happy, this must occur, and then this, and if this doesn't happen by this time, then I'm not a success. It's all mental commentary. And as soon as you hear, or I shouldn't say hear, as soon as you see and hear the mental commentary for what it is, simply a conditioned pattern of thinking, the impression of it begins to soften. And you're like, oh, wait, this voice inside my head is not me. And so to say this ought to be a certain way, I can easily say, oh, well, that's quite ridiculous for that thought that just came up.
Yeah, I've never been here before to know it should be a different way.
Correct.
And if you actually start to approach life like you just, and you came
like you're at watching a play.
You're watching a play, but you're not only watching a play, you're actually now participating in it.
But that's what makes this experience so great.
Yeah, it's almost like
we're in a play, but it's real.
Have you, and I'm asking this question, have you ever been to a comedy club to where you... I remember.
I love comedy clubs. I go to the Tempe Improv.
Yeah, and I've been to a couple where I was interacted with, and it was like, oh, please don't. And and all of a sudden, I don't know, something happened, and I think it was the way I laughed, and the comedian just pointed me out. So now I was like, oh shit, everyone's looking at me. So here, I didn't have an opinion here, and I realized if I don't go along with this comedian, and I'm just going to be destroyed. So all of a sudden I prep up and I just laugh and I go along with the comedian, whatever they said, even if it was dissing me, it was a joke. But then I laughed along with it and I went with it, but I didn't know that was going to happen. And that was the brilliant part of it. And I can only imagine that's how comedians feed off the audience, because not all comedians will interact with the audience in the direct form of communicating and talking, but a lot of them do, and I like those that actually point somebody out and say that, because even the actor or the comedian themselves didn't know that person was going to sit there. There becomes this universal, intuitive connection with another human being you've never met, and it just happens. But it wasn't choreographed. It just happened. Those are the brilliant moments. And this is what life is. We're in this choreographical play that's happening right in front of us without a script. But we know what to say and we know what to do.
And guys, think about it. This is why we hate doing these little formal events where we have to go put on a show. And it's because you're seeing the game for what it is. Yeah. When you got to go do these family events and this, and it's so, it's choreographed when you get there, and you're like, oh, I can't be who I am in front of this person.
Yeah.
You're seeing through the play, and you're like, I don't want to play with this. I don't want, and it's because you understand you're not the person. You're not what you're experiencing. You're the awareness witnessing what's going on. That's really what it is at your core. It's saying, hey, this is all bullshit, because it is all bullshit.
Yeah, well,
this is just a show. You're along for the ride. You've been here 1,000 nights before this. You're going to be here a few lives after this.
And the way I look at it, the way all this bullshit happened was, at some point, there was a non-choreographed, just ad-lib type of situation going on, and someone had seen it and thought it was brilliant. So what they did is they went home and wrote a script and tried to then replicate that situation they actually watched that came out of the blue, as we say. And then they try to package it and replicate it, and they call it a wedding vow or something like that. And all of a sudden, it's like, why is this weird? I'm like, because you're trying to replicate something that wasn't meant to be replicated. It was just come out of thin air. It's like
it was an experience, and then we latched on and made it an attachment.
It's like
this is that. We made it something.
If someone says something and I respond quickly back, and they laugh about it because it wasn't that what I said was funny, but it was in the way I said it was funny, then try to tell that story again, you're not going to get the same laugh. Because now you're trying to anticipate what the other person's going to think. And like, what makes a really funny joke is not knowing it was going to happen. And comedians will tell you, still have these bits, right? And they're funny bits because they're stories. They drag you, and boom, it takes a hard left when you're drifting right. And that perspective shift is what makes us laugh. But the funniest things that happen to comedians are the things that came upon something that happened to the audience where it wasn't part of the script as they thought as they stepped on stage. And that's really what grabs the audience. So a great comedian will open up and leave a window for spontaneity. Because if it's all strict and someone yells something, it's like, Jesus, I got to start over again.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And who likes that?
No one does. You have to just be able to go. Because a comedian is live. There is no cut. Let me come back and do this again. So there has to be this, even though they have a directive, a narrative in the story they're telling, there's an opening. And that opening is where the brilliance comes in. And they know it. And they're not waiting for the opening. They're in their monologue. And in the monologue, when the opening comes, they're so good they know how to attach that opening. And that's what started out with. The gaps is where life begins, is those openings. Leaving no judgment to this. Because if I like this and I hate this, there is no gap in that. It's infinitive. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't want that. I want infinity. I want openness. So there's more space around the tree than the tree itself. And that's how I noticed the tree. So I want to hang out in the space, in the silence before the note is where my music comes from. I marvel over that more than the note itself. But again, I shouldn't say more, equally.
It's funny because the space that you're talking about is the silence in the gaps when we speak.
That's exactly what it's is.
It's the visual version of the silence.
That's it.
And that's beautiful.
It's brilliant. So I didn't mean to say I like the gaps more than the sound.
You're beginning to notice the gaps more.
Yeah. But what I notice is I love them equally because they represent. It's like materialistic and spirituality. I love them equally the same because spirit is where material comes from, and material is a replication of the function of the imagination through spirit. So if I was only spiritual, it'd be like having a bag full of money but nothing to spend it on. It's absurd. Spirit is made to create manifest physical, utilize for the energy to create in the physical manifestation of what we experience. So there's equal both the spirit and the physical world. When you actually play them equal, life as we live here in the three-dimensional world, in one of time, is what makes it spectacular. But if you're trying to, let me try the material world first, right? It's the story of Buddha. He started out in the material world. He lived in a palace. And then he realized, oh, shit, this is not what it's cracked up to be. So I'm going to actually live in the spirit world. He's like, well, this isn't working either. And then he meditated under the tree.
Bodhi.
The Bodhi tree.
Yep.
And so what's interesting is the myth, if you will, of the Bodhi tree, or the tree of him gaining information. I heard someone use this narrative. I thought it was really interesting, a correlation between Jesus did the same thing. His tree just happened to be a cross.
Yeah.
So what he learned on the cross and what Buddha learned under the tree were the same thing. And what that thing was is spirit and the material world are to be married, just like yin and yang. They aren't to be separated. One shouldn't be over the other. If they are, you're out of balance. If you go to the left side of the boat, it tips. If you go to the right side of the boat, it tips just as equally, just to the right side. But if you play and sway in it, go a little to the left, lift to the right, the boat remains in a balanced state, in a fluctuating state. But the boat is never stagnant. It's always this flow in a boat. That's why we love boats. You got to take Dramamine sometimes, but but we like that movement. But if too much of the movement gets rocky, but it's that flowing. And when you stay in the spirit, you focus on the spirit, and the spirit brings you the imagination, then through what we understand that quantum physics explains, my attention onto something then brings that electron from a wave into a particle, and there we have a physical manifestation. And what is that? It's just a denser frequency vibration. My imagination was a truly high one out of this universe, so to speak. But then when I actually bring attention into what we call the physical world and I solidify it, it's just a lower dense frequency of my higher imagination. It's a replication at a lower level. It's almost like a holograph. If you took a holograph and I took a square out of it, like say I had a holograph that was, 1 foot by 1 foot, and I took a 1 inch by a 1 inch out of the holograph, the same exact image that was in the 1 foot by 1 foot is in the 1 inch by 1 inch. But as I go deeper, all that happens is the grain value or the pixel of it starts to fade, but you got the same exact image. Nothing changed. So if you take a little part of that hologram out, you got the full picture of the hologram in there. It spreads throughout. This is how life is. So my thought, my imagination is like this beautiful pixel. Nothing can match it. But then when I take the 1 inch cube out and make it into physical world, it replicates it and it becomes more what we call tangible and experiential. But my imagination is just as much experiential. But by utilizing the spirit into the manifestation of the physical world, I then get to share my imagination with those around me. And that's the brilliance. That's the power we have. But I don't have an opinion on it. Like
no such thing as like or dislike.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, I have imagination. I'm like, imagine your wildest dreams, And, I remember years ago when someone said that, and I'm like, they said, how much money can you imagine having? And I'm like, oh, I can't imagine having $1 million. I'm like, why not 10 million? I'm like, well, maybe 10 million is too much. Now all of a sudden my imagination is like, wah, wah, wah. And I'm like, this is your imagination. You don't have to actually put a frame or a box or a prison around it. But all of a sudden what happens is, why isn't my life expanding out? Because what you're using your imagination is your imagination is still imprisoned like your physical world is imprisoned.
I have a good buddy of mine who I talked to about this. So we were chatting, and he was describing, I just feel like I'm behind in life. It's the type of thing. I'm getting old. I don't, I should have accomplished more. When I'm talking with my friends, I'm out with buddies. They ask me how I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, not much is going on. This, that, and as he's talking to me and sharing this, I stop and I say, hey, so what if the delivery of when they ask you, what's going on, etc., was delivered differently? What if it was delivered, the same type of words, what's going on, etc., except just with a different, attitude, explain it, oh, I got this going on and this, and, deliver it with a different way. The person you're speaking to is going to receive it much differently, and it's going to be a much different conversation. Mm-hmm. Oh, this person's in a great place. And, he says to me, but then I'm just lying. And I'm like, no, there is a big, that's what the brain, the mind pattern, the programming, the subconscious mind has continuously told us. Oh, I can't do this because of that. And then when you hear, oh, you should not be afraid. You should have the ability to move forth. And people say, oh, I can't do that. That's just not me. I'm lying to myself. No. You're stuck in a pattern of thinking that is very limited, and it's keeping you comfortable, keeping you safe, because that's what the mind and body, that's what we do to make it through this scary life. We want to stay comfortable. And so it is not lying to deliver and project a feeling that you want to experience.
Yeah.
It's changing the actual chemistry, the energy, you are changing the narrative. You are changing the story not only you carry within yourself, but that you're projecting outwards, amongst friends, family, etc. And so to begin within is where it's going to start, with the way you deliver and talk about what you're working towards yourself. People see and understand when somebody is secure just as much as they can when somebody is very insecure. And so when you're not seeking this approval or validation amongst friends, amongst colleagues, amongst family, and it's a peace within, this gets delivered very sincerely and genuinely to all people around you.
Yeah.
You radiate this, in fact. And that's the point Frank and I want you to get to, is you are not lying to yourself by changing the narrative. You are not running or hiding from the truth by changing the narrative. You are changing the narrative for what you always knew you were capable of and deserve. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So don't label it so much as a lie, as a as a half truth, as a want, or as a desire. Label it as a new start, growth.
Yeah. And why do you feel like you're lying?
It's a conditioned feeling.
But the reason is
I haven't felt this way before, so it must not be me.
It comes from one thing, and it comes from you're comparing yourself. So when Einstein gave us the understanding of relativity is only to place onto yourself in the sequence in which you're in. But once I compare myself to my friends, that's what gives me inadequacy. But you aren't here to compare yourself to anybody. You cannot. Your fingerprints are different than your friends, and they always will be. No one else has your fingerprints on this planet. No one does. So why are you trying to compare yourself to your friend's fingerprints? This is when you have that premise, that's where you feel like you're lying. But if you take that premise away, and I am not them, I will never be them, all of a sudden you're not lying and you can't feel like you're lying. The reason people feel like they're lying to themselves is a comparative aspect to others and what others are doing. And that is false, because even a great sage, if he starts comparing himself to another sage, will feel inadequate. I was like, holy shit, right? Once what was funny was, so if anyone's ever listened to Terence McKenna, he's one of the, as far as I know, one of the most well-studied human beings that I haven't met him, but listened to.
Yeah.
Yeah, encountered. And he used the English language brilliantly, and he'll talk about stuff, and he'll know stuff from all different cultures and subjects, and he brings it in like this major, most amazing tapestry in the way he talks.
Like the web we live in.
Yeah. And so I was listening to him lecture on quantum physics. Now, he's like 20 minutes into the lecture, and then he's coming upon a theory in quantum physics, but he actually makes a note that there is one of the top quantum physicists on the planet sitting in the audience. So he's like, I want to make sure I get this right. So even this highly intelligent man that everyone will look at as intelligent, because he's realized I'm talking about quantum physics, and one of the most esteemed quantum physics on the planet is sitting right there. Mm-hmm. So there was this funny inadequacy about him that I've never heard before, because he never had that. But he played it off brilliantly, because it also lets you know that he knows he doesn't know everything, even though the guy knows a lot.
Absolutely. And he's playing the role.
He's playing the role. But it was funny, because here's this guy that's a quantum physicist that's very well known, and here Terence McKenna is talking about it, but he had to make that side note. So when he compared himself in talking about quantum physics to one of the well-known quantum physics, he had to make a side note. So, well, yeah, I just want to let you know, you might get a scowl from the audience because sitting here, and he named the gentleman. And so I found that to be funny, but like enlightening at the same time, because this will allow anyone to discuss a conversation. So like your buddy talking about his life. If you're talking about your life and you think you're talking to somebody that knows life better, inadequacy comes about. But they don't know it better. They just know it different. So their success is just different. It isn't better. Bill Gates' success isn't any better than mine. It's just different. All right? Now, if you have a definition of what success is, and success is this particular thing, well, you live by that. That's a narrative field. But then who the hell is going to match that success if, success is only making, earning or producing $200 billion, right? If we're looking at that. But that's not what success is. And actually, Bill Gates himself wouldn't use that as a definition of success either. But people are equally successful in their own right, but not to be compared to the other person. Because once you compare it, you lose all sensibility. And you become into this imprisonment, and everyone could feel inadequate then. Right? Everyone could feel inadequate if you're comparing to what you think somebody is better or smarter.
That's what everyone's experiencing.
It's an illusion.
Living as the person.
It's an illusion. Remember, we came to this earth and we're sitting in a play. And your friend that feels inadequate, that he's not anything, gotten anywhere, he should be further along. He got sucked into the play. That's from the point we start clapping and realize, oh my God, you got me.
Yes. Where are you supposed to be? What are you supposed to be doing?
And the thing is, we say this because I was there. So I know exactly what he feels like.
Absolutely.
That's why I never show up to my reunions.
Seriously, though.
Yeah, my gosh, I don't explain to him. I don't want to lie to these people, right? It's like,
That's the thing. That's the story, the narrative we tell ourselves in our heads.
Yeah, and now I'm like, when is my reunion? I want to talk to these people.
The trick is to recognize the commentary.
Yeah. And, but it is, because we are all our own unit, but we're all connected in this web. So just like every thread in a tapestry is connected, the thread itself has an individual identity, but without the other thread, you're just a piece of string that's a nuisance in the world. But when you put them together, it's a tapestry. It's brilliant, and that's what we're all tapestries. And your buddy, he is just as equal and valid in this tapestry than Bill Gates or any of the buddies he's talking about around the table. And so, changing perspective, understanding the narrative that you ought not to compare, perspective change becomes very easy, because there is no line. There is no line, because you are you, and no one, but through comparing, we feel like we're lying. We feel like, oh, I'm not really, I'm not really that healthy. Look at that guy over there.
And that's, again, falling into the personhood of this or that.
Yeah, who am I to speak of this stuff?
That's falling into the mind. The mind, all it can do is assign a meaning and classify something and store it. That's not what you are. That's a function of the mind. That's a function of a tool that you have been given. Mm-hmm. It's part of the body. You are the awareness to that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Sri Ramana Maharshi.
Go for it.
Okay. So while Frank was out of town, I picked up a copy of this book called Who Am I?
Mike only reads when I'm out of town.
Yeah. Frank was gone. I was like, all right, I got a week to kill. Yeah. But pick this bad boy up. Who Am I? Sri Ramana Maharshi. This is great. So nice, simple, easy read. Not too many pages. But when I was going through this, the reason I kind of brought it up right now.
We are not getting any monetary value from the sale of the book.
I'm pretty sure there's like something about this where there's something like this shouldn't be a book of profit. Like this was super cheap. Like they even sell it dirt cheap on purpose for that reason. It's anybody and everybody should be able to
afford it. Yeah,
obtain a copy. So they're big about that, which was cool.
That's like when you go to a hotel. There's always a Bible.
Yeah, same type of thing.
But actually, lately I haven't seen Bibles in hotels.
I haven't been to one in forever, so I don't even know.
You had to wear Airbnb. They don't put Bibles.
It's been a while. I'm trying to think.
Maybe you should put that in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna start leaving a copy coffee.
We start going
anywhere
to like
I stay.
hotels here. Just take the Bible out and use this.
There you go.
People will read it. It's a pamphlet.
Well, yeah, and it's only 12 pages.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice too. To be like, hey, it's an easier read.
Yeah, it's like the Bible. It's like they're never going to get through it in a hotel stay.
One of the things I read about Bhagavan is that his first name's Bhagavan too. That's something I learned.
Vagabond?
Yep. But anyway, so one thing I read about Bhagavan is he described, when it comes to books, he was like, yeah, it's great, read, learn, but keep in mind what this is about. Is it about an experience? And you cannot experience, necessarily through constant reading. Always, it becomes back to the want. Oh, I'll find the answer. I just need to read more. I just need to find more. Mm-hmm. No, you are everything you are right now. But what was great about Bhagavan is, so he was back, what was it? First half of the 20th century. And I heard this story one time where he had some visitor come to his ashram. And so it's his place of, meditation, worship, whatever you want to call it, peace, spirituality. And at the ashram, he said to Bhagavan, he's like, how do I know I'm on the spiritual path? And his response was very straightforward and simple. And he was like, the only true criterion is the absence of thought. And I thought that was extremely powerful. And what he's getting at when he says that is a true measurement of, enlightenment, the path, the spirituality, what we're all seeking essentially is, number one, there's nothing to seek. You already are. But at the core of this, it's becoming aware of the mental commentary within our minds or within our heads, whatever you want to say it. And that's what he's drawing us to, or drawing our attention to, is waking up. When somebody says that they have woken up, they have become aware that there is a voice inside of their head that has been talking and narrating their experience. And the person or the awareness has been associated to that. And so we've been living our lives day in, day out as this voice in our head, which is actually subconscious thought. And we have not been able to detach from that mental commentary. We think we are that person talking. So if you're at home right now saying, what voice is that? You are associating with a mental commentary and thinking you are that voice. And what Frank and I want you to experience is detaching and seeing that voice for what it is. It's not you. That is mental commentary. And the more and more you practice and put in the effort with these methods, the less and less that mental commentary has a grip and a presence in your everyday life. And that's really what Sri Ramana was getting at.
Yeah.
So he released this book called Who Am I? And he's all about self-inquiry. And so self-inquiry is a great way, a great method that Frank and I, of course, believe in. You've got to go within for everything. But what he meant by self-inquiry is he wanted you to see that you are not the person. So how he phrases it, and I brought it right here so I could remember this, is he asks us to ask the question, to whom has this thought arisen? And of course, the answer would be, to me. Okay, so what is to me? So therefore, if one inquires, who am I? The mind will go back to its source. And the thought that arose will then become quiet. So what he's saying here is each thought that comes up, we ask, who is having this thought? And that thought, when we bring it back to, it is the person, not the awareness having that thought. And you detach from it. And you do this over and over. And you no longer become attached to this idea of yourself. This is where the no like and dislike comes into play. You aren't a person. A person can only like or dislike. And so it's a awareness to what's going on. It's a silence. It's a space. It's a gap. That's who I am. That's what we are. And so he dives deep into that, and I think that is great. A way he something that he personally really opened up my eyes when I read this book this last week was, I'm just gonna read it if that's cool with you, Frank.
Yeah, just read all 12 pages.
Okay. Yeah, I know, right?
Just stop at the beginning.
So no, he says,
Once upon a time.
are there no other ways, or are there no other means? Are there no other means for making the mind quiescent? So making the mind quiet. And so this is how he responded, and I thought this was brilliant because Frank and I, meditation is a great way to calm the mind. So he says, other than self-inquiry, there are no adequate means. That's a very bold statement. He's saying, without realizing, who am I? I'm not the person. I'm the awareness. There are no other means. You will not attain enlightenment. You will not find yourself simply by meditating constantly throughout the day. It needs to be an experience of the self, of the silence. And so he says, if through other means it is sought to control the mind will appear to be controlled, but will go again forth. Through the control of breath, the mind will also become quiet, but it will remain quiet only so long as the breath remains controlled. And when the breath resumes, the mind also will again start moving and will wander as impelled by residual impressions. So when he says impressions, he's meaning perspective. How do we see this? What did our mind project, assign a meaning to? That is an impression. So as we control our breath, we see that the breath is mind. And that's where he gets at. And that's where he goes next. The source is the same for both mind and breath. Thought indeed is the nature of mind. The thought I is the first thought of the mind, and that is the ego. It is from there that ego originates, that breath also originates. So mind, ego, breath, this is all the same thing. We are the awareness of this.
Just
we are
different
not.
degrees of it,
Yeah, correct. Yeah, back to the degrees. So then it goes on and it says, let me pull this up. It's about impression. Okay. Like the practice of breath control, meditation on the forms of God, repetition of mantras, restriction on food are aids for rendering the mind quiet, but they are not the means. You will not solely obtain what you are quote unquote seeking.
Those are the permission slips of what they are.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so to also be clear too, it's like we understand is every human being is on the spiritual path, but when we learn to quiet the mind, we actually enjoy the path. So everyone's got a ticket to the play, but if you constantly are chattering, you're missing the play in the way it was meant to be presented. So when we learn to quiet our mind, you actually enjoy the path that you've always been on. So that's when the path becomes known. And so like when you're talking about breath, let's take this down to basic understandings. So everyone knows if they've done any athletic performance. When an athlete, and let's take a runner, there's a thing called the runner's high. And when does the runner's high come in? It's when they control their breath. Because when you first start running, I don't care how long you've been running, you have to burn and get the rhythmic aspect of the breath and then the amount of energy you're actually burning up and as your movement. So the body has to then pull in oxygen more. So you're breathing heavier. So there's a bit of uncomfortableness. Then your body goes through cramping and muscles and oxygen moving through. But then there becomes a point, if you go long enough, that the amount of oxygen that's coming into your system is the same amount of energy you're exerting, and that becomes the breath under control, and you're no longer thinking, and that's what they call the runner's high. So if a runner out there's like, what's this high? It's because your breath is pulling in enough energy, because that's what breath is, air is, it's information and energy into the body at the same rate you're exerting energy. It's almost like you're attached to a fuel tank in your car and you'll never run out of gas. But in the beginning, you have to stop or you can feel it and you push through. But once you get that natural rhythm of breathing, whether you're running or doing anything, you're no longer thinking. You just you're bringing in energy. You're in that flow, and it's the most brilliant thing. And people say, how long can I stay there? A long time. But to step out of it is to understand you were in it. So we live in this rhythmic world. So I must sway right to understand what the swaying of left is. So we play that game. So it's not to be, when I'm out of it, don't be disappointed.
Well, and like one thing, this flow that Frank's describing.
Because even for him to write that book, he had to get into the state of thinking. But yet the words probably came to him in the state of breath.
I should probably share that too. So one cool thing about this was recorded by a member of his ashram. And at first, Bhagavan wasn't speaking. Mm-hmm. It was not, I'm taking a vow of silence, nothing like that. He just did not feel compelled to speak. But essentially...
Karen wishes that of me sometimes.
Why don't you just be compelled not to speak, Frank?
Like, hey, how about you do the vow of silence just for the evening? I'm like, yeah.
So rather what one of the members of the ashram did is he went to Bhagavan and, asked these, I think it's 13, or no, I believe it's 12 questions, and then there's a version with 24 questions. Mm-hmm. So he asked him these 12 or 24 questions, and Bhagavan wrote in the dirt basics.
Oh, really?
Answers,
like I did when I was 5 with a stick. Yeah.
Truly. Yeah. And so that these were the recorded answers, to these questions that were asked of him.
So this is pretty much a...
It's great. I would highly recommend it. You can find a free PDF online if you just Google Who Am I PDF.
It's pretty much a transcript. It's not...
Oh, yeah.
So it's not really a thought-out book. It was transcribed.
Yep.
So whatever he said, all right.
Yeah, right here. It was the questions were put to Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi by Sri M. Siva Prakasam Pillai about the year of 1902. Sri Pillai was a graduate in philosophy and was at the time employed at...
And paper was very tough to come by back then. That's why he has to use dirt.
Yeah, seriously. Met the Maharashi there. But great book.
Yeah, I'm going to read it.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth reading, and it's eye-opening. It's so short. It's so simple. It's to the point. This is something that you can pick up, and reflect on.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's something you just pick up, and it's a great reminder. Yeah. Kind of pulls you out of this play.
Yeah.
When you're feeling really sucked in by the play, this nice little breather type of thing.
But it is nice to come back into the play too, to get lost. So
like you were saying, that's the balance.
Yeah, it is.
That's what we're getting at.
The spirit world is the quiet mind, and the physical world is the play.
Yep.
And we want to come into it like, okay, I like this. Okay, you go back into the spirit world. How do I expand it? How do I do it? How do I shift it? How do I change it?
Perspective.
And then you go into it. So perspective comes out of the silence. So it's not a...
Perspective is a mind thing.
Yeah,
it's not a silencing. It's more for the experience and what you're witnessing and involved.
It's almost like, hey, I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this thing here. Like I'm drinking this water out of this cup.
Could be bad, could be good.
And I'm using my right hand. Let me try using my left hand. Left hand. So all of a sudden, that's the shift in perspective. I want to see what happens when I shift to perspective. And when you understand what happens is everything changes. So if you can control, you get the experience of everything changes by just changing the perspective. You're in control of what's coming at you. So you just do simple things like this. I'm like, I want to become ambidextrous. I'm like, well, that's a good thing, but just experience being ambidextrous and see what happens. And what it lets you know that you can shift at any time you want, but it doesn't have to be utilized outward. It can be, but just the experience of knowing, oh my God, just by grabbing with my left hand opposed to my right hand, it changes everything. And I was in control of that. By shifting the perspective gives me control. And knowing I have control, I then own the world in which I live in. I own the stage in which I'm upon. But I don't have to preempt what I'm going to shift to. that will come as time goes on. And that's the brilliance of it. And that is the true understanding of perspective shift. Is just allowing it to happen, but knowing I have control. I can look at it any way I want. Why would I? And just knowing I could change it pushes away the degree of anger into happiness. That's when the degrees change. It's having control. So
happiness isn't something you obtain. Happiness is a perspective.
Yeah. And controlling and understanding your perspective shifts everything is almost like having control of the thermostat in your house. You get to set the temperature. It doesn't come upon you. It's like, it's cold in here. Well, change the thermostat. You have so changing the thermostat is a change in degree, a change in perspective. You have control of it. But don't sit there and complain that it's too cold when the thermostat's right there. This is what a lot of people do. They don't realize they have access to this thermostat of their life. And it's called your perspective. Shift it, change it, push the button. And guess what? Some days you're going to want it cold, some days you're going to want it hot.
And how? How do we change that perspective? You know, Frank mentioned this earlier. It's in surrender. It's in letting go.
Yeah.
You have to let go. And so for those at home who are saying, well, what does it mean to let go, right? Letting go is a pretty vague concept when you say that. So what are Frank and I talking about? Relax. It's like you've constantly been holding a fist, and finally you can let go. And so letting go is simply a relaxing. And that's what you're doing when you sit down to meditate, is you are relaxing. You're no longer tense. You're no longer expecting or waiting for something specific to happen that you've created. Mm-hmm. It is a complete relaxation of the body, the energy around you, your field.
And that would be the spirit side. And then relaxing and then grabbing the mug again would be the material side. So I want equal value in it because I want to take the drink, so I need to grab, then release and put it down. I want to do, but if I do this and completely relax, I'll never get a drink of water out of my cup. So we want to play with both, and my perspective allows that to happen. It's not about just letting go, but how do you let go of something? Grab onto something else. Yeah. It's the monkey bar theory that me and Mike came up with.
Yeah, I love
how do I let go of the bar that I'm holding? By grabbing on the one in front of you. You'll naturally let go. And that momentum, the movement, is the experience of bliss and joy where there's no thought. This is what we're talking about. So you can get into this rhythm of life and stay there for a long time.
And Frank and I are not saying to attach to something new.
No, you can't. The game stops.
Exactly.
The game stops.
It's a continuous experience.
Yeah.
It's no longer do you try to hold on and to attach to an experience.
Yeah.
No, it's a flow and it's a movement. It's a balance. Like Einstein would say, the only way to find balance is to keep going.
Yeah.
That's what life is.
Even an octopus would come to a stalemate even though it has 8 tentacles to grab onto stuff. Because then there's always a 9th thing to grab and it can't because it's holding on. You must let go. But how do you let go? Grab onto something else. How do you get out of a situation that occurred?
And grab on something that you would like to grab onto.
Which is right in front of you.
Yep.
So this momentum, when you're looking in the direction in which you're moving, that is success, period. How you look at it, what you're doing. But most people will turn right, and I've used this analogy before, and as they're turning right, they're looking left, and they run into a tree, and they're like, I shouldn't have gone right. I know I shouldn't have gone left. I'm like, no. Why you hit the tree is because you were looking left as you were making a right turn. If you actually fully invested your energy into looking right as you made right, it would have been supreme, just as equal as left would have been.
And another way to say that analogy is, okay, you would like to start that business that you're always talking about, right? So why are you continuing to work this one job consistently day out without starting the next? It's you're looking one way, saying you want to go this way, but no, unfortunately, I have to do this in order to stay established, stay safe, etc. No, it doesn't need to be a complete ditch of what's currently happening by no means, but you can begin to look towards the direction you want to go. So everything else is a story of why you can't. why you can't. Start telling yourself the story of all the reasons you can.
Yeah.
And then the opportunities begin to show themselves, and you're moving towards that direction, and it feels good.
Yeah, because
not just, I wish I could do this, but I can't because I have this commitment.
Yeah. The evidence in
that's looking east and trying to go west.
Yeah, take a linear thing like in the world that we live in as business. Me and Mike both have our own businesses. We know this. If I look in the direction in which I'm going, all the evidence of the business expanding are in front of me, not behind me. But the doubt of it's going to work is behind you, and that's why you never move forward. So you think, I'm not good at this. I'm like, what you're not good at is moving towards where the evidence is to get to. If I don't head west in a westward direction, I can't make it to the beach. It's not that the beach doesn't exist. Anyone who moves west from Phoenix and make it to San Diego, if they continue roughly about 300 miles or so, will always get there. There is no doubt. This is mathematically equated. Mm-hmm. Now, my experience when I get there will be different than the other person who got there. That's the only thing that's different based on what I'm bringing with it. But if I continue down this road, these are mathematical equations that never fail. But the experience you have in moving and focusing in the direction of it is why we do it. That's really why we do it at the end of the day. But you'll always succeed. You just have to keep your eye on the ball, as I say, in the direction in which you're moving, and you'll start to see the evidence is working, because it always does work. I no longer have doubt. Moving in a direction and focusing in the direction in which I'm going is success, is how I get places. But if I was driving my car looking at the rearview mirror, yeah, it'd be a lot of accidents, you know. I would have to own a body shop, you know. It would be, and I wouldn't want to drive a car. If someone said you must look in the rearview mirror and drive forward, no one would be driving. But that's absurd. But that absurdity can be moved into, if you're not doing what you want, it's because you're driving your car looking in the rearview mirror. You came here to move in a direction and focus in that direction, and success is yours already. But it's very difficult to drive a car and look in the rearview mirror. It physically doesn't work. The physics of it don't work. You must look at the windshield. And when you look at the windshield, the road opens and keeps opening and opening and opening and opening. It never stops until you hit the coast and you have to get on a boat. And that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, and that's what we want to really bring into this. These are principles, and there's correlations. We don't know the full, like I get into this. I don't know the full causation of anything.
No, we can't.
Can't.
It's just a story we'd be making up.
And I even say, I almost sometimes refrain from we can't, because then that gives me a causation onto it, and I don't know that either. But I know there's correlations and principles when I follow. They work, such as if I'm moving west, I best face west in order to have a comfortable, safe trip. So if I want to start a business, know that I can start a business and move in the direction and face the direction and put your energy in the direction of it. And the money, the means, the people, the what, everything is already there. Just like the beach is already there. I just have to move into it. But if you're waiting for the beach to come to me, there lies the problem.
And that's what majority of us are doing.
Yeah, you have to create an attraction to something, and the attraction, then you get pulled towards it.
We're going east and saying, why have I not arrived at west?
Or you're sitting on the couch, so to speak.
Exactly. Why is this not... of course, this wouldn't happen for me. You know, it's associating with these, with the voice in the head, the mental commentary.
Yeah.
Only in the absence of thought are you going to find yourself in that moment.
Yeah, and these equations of physics we're talking about never, ever fail. They never mess up. You know, when you put the E equals MC squared to the test, if it never, ever, ever, ever fails.
Holds up.
2 plus 2 will always be 4, if you know what I'm saying. So these principles will never fail you, but if you never add 2 plus 2, you will not get the 4 in what you're looking for. So you have to add the 2 together, the 2 numerals, numbers, and then, yeah.
Well, as you go on this path, you get in this, at least for me, you get in this like half in, half out stage, in the beginning, and like, you're like, hey, there's something to this. And then you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. And this feels weird, and keep going.
Yeah.
It gets better.
And it does. And what happens, so now it's like, am I fully in there? I'm like, no, I get distracted. But now my distraction is like when I'm driving down the road and I hear digga, 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 I don't question what happened. I just simply move left back into the lane where there's no digga, 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 digga. So when I start getting frustrated, I change my perspective. And I don't say, why did I get frustrated? Because I just got distracted. I don't go back into my childhood to figure out why I'm pissed off right now.
And create this crazy narrative.
I move forward. So you're seeing like therapists from the past will take you back. Let's go on the couch and take you back to 5 years old and find out what happened. Well, the quantum therapists now are saying, let's not go back, let's go forward. And by moving forward, you actually eradicate the past.
Oh, the past doesn't exist.
You resurrect the past into a whole new thing. You actually take it with you, but it's a whole new thing.
A new meaning, a new story that you've created.
But if you go back into your past and relive it and think you're not going to be horrified again, come on.
It's silly.
Move to a different frequency, a different place, a different degree of the same thing.
And you start to get good at it.
Yeah. So if you had a fearful moment in your life, you can take that fear and change the degree on it. And how do you change the degree? You shift your perspective and you go from fear to courage.
You relax.
Yeah, relax. We just have to know what's in us. We have to know we're always on the path. And if you know the physics, just knowing the simple physics is what makes the physics work better. Because sometimes, like, if I didn't understand these principles, which I didn't at a point in my life, I had lucky days and I had unlucky days. Now I don't have lucky days and unlucky days. I have days of distraction, which I take responsibility for, and I have days of bliss. So it's not luck and unluck. It's focus and distraction.
It's all mind.
It's all me.
Well, I heard an awesome.
Well, I'm lucky. I was lucky today. I hope I'm lucky again today.
Well, that same thing. Picture the luck as a day that the sun is breaking through the clouds, and the unlucky days as the cloudy days.
Yeah.
Even on a cloudy day, the sun's still always there, right?
Always is.
But in those moments when the clouds open up and the sun shines through, that's like us saying, "Oh, we're lucky." No, just like thoughts, all these bad thoughts, and then the good thought, "Oh, today's a good day.
Yeah, but why?
I'm having a great day."
Think about that. Like, how did we get the idea that a cloudy day?
And so we stumble through life.
How do we get the connotation that a cloudy day is what we call bad or negative, opposed to a sunny day?
Oh, conditioning.
Isn't that interesting? It really is, because, it's funny, living in Arizona, the sun shines, 300 plus.
I was just going to say, we get a rainy day. It's like a snow day for us.
Yeah, and people love it.
Oh, I love it.
People love it, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And then...
like, I stop what I'm doing if I'm working.
Yeah.
I go out and I take a break if it starts raining every time.
Yeah, I love it. But it was funny. I
appreciate it.
I know people that were like, it's like, it was cloudy out today, and like, to have 2 cloudy days in a row in Phoenix is like, go play the lottery. Yeah, that's what I say, But I remember, like, someone was telling me, I'm like, oh yeah, it's cloudy. I'm like, when's these clouds going to go away? And I'm thinking to myself, it's been 2 days. We could spare the time. Right?
We're good.
Enjoy it,
Yeah.
Now you can look up in the sky during the day without sunglasses on.
Yeah.
But it's just funny, like, because their narrative and focus on it must be sunny for me to be happy. And when the clouds come in, even if it's 1 or 2 days, they go back into that deep depression.
And we do this with a number of things, not just weather.
And it's true, because there is a correlation. People oh, it's the lack of sun that creates depression. And I'm like, I know people that are depressed living in Phoenix. And I know people that don't experience depression live in Seattle. So that's a permission slip to allow yourself to get depressed or not depressed. Their permission slip, there's no empirical truth to it. Because there are people that live in Seattle, and I use that as an example because they probably have more cloudy days than, say, Phoenix. So if it was the sun that made you happy, and if it was clouds that make you sad, there's no evidence to that. But we're attaching a thought to it, and we use it as a permission slip. And oh shit, it's gonna be a hell of a day. It's cloudy. I'm like, you're telling that story. If you change the perspective onto it, everything changes, and you have control of it. So why would you choose to have a cloudy day? Because you can't control the weather. Unless you live in Phoenix, you can.
The only thing we control is within.
Yeah. But in Phoenix, you literally, like, to see a cloudy day, it's just like, it's not really. It's going to be cloudy tomorrow. Yeah, I'll see it when I believe. I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah.
No, seriously, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Except for, we had a lot of rain this summer. So
We did get a good monsoon season.
Yeah, monsoon.
Love it.
Yep. So, but that's just it. When you start to contemplate what me and Mike are talking about today and take control of your perspective, just to shift the perspective, you actually naturally, like when I grab this with one hand and grab it with the other hand, it feels different. And the field of difference is why we're here. That's what I'm looking for. I'm like, wow, this feels different. And what made it different was me shifting my perspective and grabbing with the other hand that I normally grab with.
And these concepts and what Frank and I are discussing is something we are all experiencing right now. And this is not something you need to seek to find. This is not something you're searching for. This is more a letting go of what you are not and beginning to just be and experience. And you see and begin to feel the space, the gaps around you. And wow, at any moment, this could change.
It can.
And at any moment, I can put a different perspective on
Anyone out there that does shots of tequila using their right hand, if you start using your left hand, you're going to get a different drunk.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Look, experiment
I was
with this.
we're going to try that, actually.
Yeah, don't listen to Frank.
No, we're just teasing. But that's the thing. This whole thing, it's fun. It's a game. Get in there and play around.
I'm actually going to try it out. I'm going to start doing shots.
Man, I feel totally different.
Yeah, I feel totally
different. Because now you're at 6 instead of 3.
Yeah, because I'm stripping. Yeah, because my right hand is more sophisticated. I'm like, oh, shit.
You were 0 shots deep on the right hand.
There's more tequila on the bar than
6. This is nuts.
It's probably better off. If you're an alcoholic, start using the other hand. You'll slow down the drinking. That's a perspective shift for you.
There you go.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thanks for joining us this week, guys. We'll be back next week. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and subscribe to us below. You can send in comments. We love to answer any questions. You can also email us at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com.
Peace out.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
You got it.